Okay, for this, this is a demonstration after looking at the conceptual video about how to do all of these different rerouting of audio. So I'm just going to start at the beginning and bring in some new tracks. So the first one is I want to create a stereo audio track, and let's just do this step-by-step one at a time. Create another stereo audio track, make sure it's selected as stereo. Create a third stereo audio track. Make sure that is stereo, and then we want to create one new auxiliary input. This is where we'll send our do our sends and our different things. So if you use command plus the equal sign, you can switch back and forth between the mix window and between the audio window, or the editing window. So that'll be important to be able to see, to be able to move and work with things very quickly. My apologies, I'm not sure if the sound is going to come out on this recording from the Pro Tools, but this is really to demonstrate the steps. So if there's no sound, it's not because it's not working. So you could have recorded audio. I brought it in from the from a couple of clips. So the first, we had covered before how to do an insert. The inserts, this happens to be in the track view, you can see. You can also find the inserts here. And basically an insert, you can select a plugin and you can choose a reverb, and then it will appear here, and then you'll get your reverb here. You can experiment with these different dials. There's different factory defaults that will give you specific acoustics of different spaces. The other thing is that you can decide by clicking and dragging this element how much or how little reverb. You can see dry over here, which means very little processing, and then wet over here. So you can decide on that. And again, this insert, if we go back to the edit view, this insert will only, well, I can show you in the. This insert will only affect this track, this first audio track, and bringing the volume level up and down. 100% of the reverb will be applied to this. So this is one place where it's useful, but it's also you don't have as much control over the level of processing against the original signal. So we can say no insert. Let's take that out. The second way to work with audio is to send some of the signal to another track. So this is where we use these sends here. The first thing that we need to do is we have to pay attention to our input and output. So as I said in the tutorial, in order to use an auxiliary track as a send track, we first have to choose the input, and we need to go to the bus and well, I think we set this up as a, let's go back and delete this and set this up because it's set it up as a mono track. That's the thing, that if you're going to work with stereo tracks, all of the tracks have to be stereo as well. So if we go back up and create a new auxiliary input and change it to stereo, now it will work with the track. So you have to make sure that that's the case. Okay, so if we go back to the mix window, and now we want to select our inputs for buses so that we can route other tracks to it. Now you can see there's a bus 1 and 2 because it needs to be 2 tracks for stereo. Okay, and then that will be our input that we can reroute the audio tracks to, and then this will go out to the main out left-right, which is the sound card. And so what we need to do over here is we need to choose the output. So if we go down to the send, and you can see these are already changed color, this means they're in use. So these ones mean that if you put them, if you routed part of the audio 1's track signal to any of these, then they wouldn't go anywhere because there's nothing set up for that. But these are set. So now you can see your send is going to bus 1 and 2, which is set up for this auxiliary track. So now what you have here is a fader that came up. It's separate than this fader. This is the fader for the auxiliary track. What this is this is the, remember our diagram, this is the dry signal. So this is the original audio out, and this is the wet signal. Right now, if we look at, and this is just for this track, even though that we can send multiple tracks to this auxiliary track, we will have control over each audio that's being processed in that track. So this master fader is not going to control all of the tracks that are coming in. So what we want to do though is, if we look at this auxiliary track, now we have to choose, if we want to use this as an effects track, we have to choose an effect to be able to process this. And now what this has done is that on the auxiliary track is where the effect exists. And so if we were to play this back, I'm not sure this is going to sound in your computer, but what's happening, if you can't hear this, let me turn this one down. What's happening is that there's a signal coming out of here, which is a dry signal, and then this is the wet signal of the reverb. And so, for example, if I turn this all the way down and I turn this all the way up, then track number 1 is just going to have 100% reverb on it. But if I turn this down and turn this up, now there's less reverb and more non-reverb signal. Now you can play around with balance between them. And one of the reasons why you would want to have a dry signal in addition to the wet signal is because if you just have a wet signal, the reverb is going to push the sound into the back of the recording. It's going to sound more distant. So if you want to have some reverb, but you want to keep some presence of the signal, then you can use the dry signal in combination with the wet signal. So that's set up for an auxiliary send on bus 1 and 2 for the audio 1. The only thing we need to do for audio 2 is the same thing, select the same track, and now you can see this here, because this is highlighted, now you can see that this is the control for the auxiliary track, but specifically for the for audio 2. So if we switch and click on this, you can see how here it switches to audio 1. So this is how you can set up auxiliary tracks to have effects in auxiliary tracks. So let's take all those out. Now let's talk about the third situation, which is using the auxiliary track as a submix. So this means that maybe we have two sounds on these two audio tracks here, audio 1 and audio 2, that maybe we found a good setting, for example here, and we feel that, okay, that's the right balance between those two, but within the whole recording session, we want to be able to bring those up and down without having to move and calibrate them in the same way, like something like this, and have to do that. Oh, I needed a little choir, so I have to do that. Now if we have them set like this, now if we reroute those, we can control both of that mix with a submix. And so what we do here is, instead of making so we keep the bus 1 and 2 set for the input for the auxiliary track, but instead of making the bus come out of a send, what we want to do is we want to take the output of the track and we want to route that through the bus. And we want to do that for both of them. Oops. So now we have the outputs of audio track 1 and audio track 2 are no longer coming out through here. So these will not control anything. Well, they do because it's connected up there. But this is really the thing that controls. This is really the thing that controls both of those tracks now. So these can stay at your settings that you want, and now this will control the level of the track. So what's happening is both of these are coming into here and then coming out here. Now, you can also decide to set up a reverb, for example, here, and you have processing on both of them. So, but it's not like the wet dry signal anymore. These basically are shut off, and now you're controlling both of the outputs of those tracks. Well, they're not shut off, those are the levels. But now there's no audio coming out of these two, it's all coming out here, and you can add the effect and process both of them at the same time. So that's called a submix, and that's, like I said before, that can be useful for a number of different things. Okay, so the final one, which doesn't involve the auxiliary track. Let's go back to the other view. It doesn't involve the auxiliary track at all. It's mixing down these two tracks into another track. So you're basically combining these two tracks into a third track. So it's a recording technique. So what you have to do here is maybe put no input on the auxiliary to take it out of circulation. Now what you can do is go to the audio 3 track, which is where you're going to record the first two tracks, and select bus 1 and 2. It doesn't have to be 1 and 2, whatever's available. And then now both of these are already set to bus 1 and 2. So now both of these are routed into the input of audio 3. And what we can do is we can record both of those if we arm the track and then press record. Oops. Sorry, press record.